Our story continues from the year 1508, when the Franks conquered all Gaul and besieged the little king of the Visigoths in the castle of Carcassonne. Here we should note that the Mediterranean coast of France is a valley, which from the north is covered by small but rocky mountains of the Cevennes, so that the Franks, having seized the northern plains of Gaul, and could not get through the mountain passages to the sea. The main nodes of defense of the Visigoths were Carcassonne in the west, in the valley between the Pyrenees and the Cevennes mountains, and Arles in the east, where the Burgundians and the Franks, who had joined them, unsuccessfully besieged the garrison of the Visigoths. Meanwhile, in Narbonne, 30 kilometers from Carcassonne, the Visigothic armies gathered again, but the council there elected King Ghazale, the illegitimate son of Alaric II, who chose Narbonne as his new residence, instead of the lost former capital, Toulouse. The capital's proximity to the front line indicated that the Visigoths were not resigned to the loss of their north. But Ghazala did not act, although a day's march from him was besieged by his brother, which hints us either about the weakness of his army, or about the unwillingness to save the rightful heir to the throne, or about the complete incompetence of Ghazala as a commander. Theodoric, in the turmoil of deafeningly sad news from Gaul, recognized Ghazala, finally freed from problems with the Byzantine fleet and northern borders, began to gather to help his allies, but not in time. Separated from the siege of Arles, Gundobad, king of the Burgundians, moved along the coast and defeated Ghazala in Narbonne. He fled to Spain and organized a new capital at Barcelona. However, Gundobad soon approached there as well, forcing Ghazala to flee deep into Spain away from the battles he was continuously losing. Only the invasion of the Ostrogoths, who defeated the Franks besieging Arles, inflicting a terrible defeat on them, turned the tide of the war. A huge number of Franks were captured and brought to Arles, where, suddenly, they began to buy them out of captivity Latin priests. It is said that the bishop of Arles did not spare the silver and gold jewelry of the temples, melting them into coins, and sent the soldiers of Christ to their native north, so that they could return in the future and win back some more cities from the Arian kings. The Ostrogoths caught up with and defeated the Burgundians, then sent an invasion army north and made peace with them on status quo terms. Next, the Ostrogoth generals lifted the siege of Carcassonne and freed Amalaric, grandson of Theodoric, because he was the son of his daughter, and Alaric II, fought with the Franks for a year and finally made peace, giving them everything they had seized north of the mountains, and a couple years later moved on poor Ghazala, who fled to Africa to the Vandals. The further adventures of this bastard, who called himself king and continued to fight with the Franks, would take him to Gaul and Spain, but in the end he would be caught somewhere on the border of the kingdoms and executed as a rebel. On the throne of the Visigoths reigns little Amalaric, who is tutored by the dukes of Theodoric. As for Chlodwig, he received not only the lands and treasury of the Visigoths, captured in Toulouse. Returning to Tours, he solemnly celebrated the victory with ambassadors from Byzantium, who handed him a purple tunic and mantle, and on his head laid the crown of the consul. Spreading silver and gold, our hero, called by flatterers consul or even Augustus, solemnly rode through Tours, after which he retired to Paris, a natural fortress on the Seine River. This city, Chlodwig chose his further residence and further ruled from there. The war with the Goths was completed by his sons. The wily Byzantines, by the way, did not inscribe the name of Chlodwig in their fasts, which means that he was given only regalia, but not the title of consul. But what difference does it make, and who will know about it in barbarian Gaul? Chlodwig died in the year 511, at the age of 45, at the zenith of his power, and we have only to mention a few events which prevent the Roman Church from consecrating him. As we remember, by the beginning of Chlodwig's reign, the Franks were ruled by a multitude of kings, all related in one way or another. So during his reign, Chlodwig methodically destroyed his relatives, making sure that no one but his children could claim the throne. The first to fall was Chlodwig's old ally, Sigebert the Lame. The cunning Frank conspired to murder his son Chloderic. When Sigebert was killed, The assassins and Chlodwig seized his chests of jewels, and someone suggested that Chlodwig run his hands to the bottom and shake out the riches to inspect them. The moment his son bent down and plunged his hands into the chest, he was killed by a blow on the head. Against Theodoric, who had once failed to help Chlodwig in the battle against Cevennes, our hero acted in person. He captured the king and his son, but since he made the decision publicly, he did not kill his relatives, but tonsured them into monks. Long hair was then considered a sign of royalty, and Harari was inconsolable. But his son comforted him by saying something like, "Hair can grow back, Dad." Upon learning of this, Chlodwig changed his mind and ordered potential rivals to be eliminated later. Of the major kings, Ragnar, an old ally, remained, and Chlodwig bribed some of the nobles who began to call on Chlodwig for help against some of their king's excesses. Chlodwig arrived, and instead of fighting, the traitors twisted their own king and delivered him to the victor. Then Chlodwig said to Ragnar, "If you were a true king, you would not have allowed yourself to be bound like this," and personally chopped the king to death with an axe. Then he went to the brother of the murdered man and said something like, "What kind of brother are you if you let him die so shamefully?" and also cut him down. Well, and in the end it turned out that the gold with which Chlodwig had bribed Ragnar's vassals was counterfeit. And when the traitors began to complain that they had been cheated, Chlodwig told them something like, "And what reward awaits the people who brought their own king to his death?" The terror didn't stop as Chlodwig sent out assassins grabbing brothers and other relatives of slain kings so they couldn't claim titles in his kingdom. Dying, our hero began to complain, "Woe is me that I have remained a stranger among strangers, and I have no relatives who could help me in any way in a moment of danger." But everyone understood perfectly well that in this way he just hoped that someone would remember that somewhere there were still people to be killed. It is difficult to say whether this was in the order of things, because in the Burgundians' neighborhood the same Gundobad came to power by killing all his brothers. But for example, in the Vandals, I do not remember such a bloodbath. In any case, we will study history further, and we will see whether the cruelty of Chlodwig was something unique, or it was usual affairs for Germanic kingdoms. In the sequel, we will return to Italy and look at the reign of Theodoric. After Theodoric, we will bid farewell to the 5th century and move into the much darker 6th.